You probably came here because something does not add up. You are carrying a quiet kind of exhaustion, the kind that builds slowly over months or years, until you realize you are no longer living your own life. You have replayed conversations in your head. You have questioned your memory, your reactions, your worth. You have wondered if you were too sensitive, too demanding, or if you simply missed the warning signs early on. I want you to pause for a moment and take a slow breath. You are not imagining this. You are not broken. You were not the problem. What you experienced was an imbalance disguised as connection. It felt confusing because it was never meant to be clear. It was designed to keep you adjusting, hoping, and trying harder. And the truth is, people who rely on emotional control and image management rarely stay consistent. Over time, the weight of maintaining a false version of themselves becomes too heavy to carry. They begin to show you who they really are, not in dramatic explosions, but in quiet, repeated moments that slowly strip away the illusion. You do not need to prove anything to anyone anymore. You just need to see what was already there. The exposure does not happen all at once. It happens in fragments. It happens when you stop making excuses for the inconsistencies. It happens when you finally allow yourself to trust what you are actually seeing instead of what you were told to believe. In the beginning, everything felt intentional and aligned. There was attention, understanding, and a sense of being deeply seen. That stage is real, but it serves a specific function. It builds trust quickly, and it lowers your natural defenses. When someone needs validation or control to feel stable, they will mirror what you want to hear and reflect what you need to feel safe. But maintaining that reflection requires constant effort. It is not sustainable because it is not rooted in genuine reciprocity. As time passes, the effort drops. You start noticing small shifts, a comment that minimizes your experience, a sudden impatience when you share something vulnerable, a subtle change in tone when you ask for consistency. These are not random mistakes. They are the mask slipping. The psychology behind this is straightforward. When a person builds their identity around image and control rather than authentic connection, they eventually run out of energy to keep the performance aligned with reality. They do not expose themselves on purpose. They expose themselves because the facade requires more emotional labor than they are willing or able to sustain. And when you notice those first cracks, you probably made excuses for them. You thought they were stressed. You told yourself it was a bad week. You adjusted your expectations to keep the peace. That adjustment is exactly what the dynamic relies on. It teaches you to tolerate less while convincing yourself you are being understanding. But understanding should not cost you your sense of reality. When you stop normalizing the shift, you begin to see the pattern. The charm was never a promise of stability. It was a tool for access. And once access was secured, the maintenance stopped. As the relationship moves forward, the gap between what is said and what is done becomes impossible to ignore. Promises are made with certainty, but follow-through is selective. Apologies sound sincere in the moment, but the behavior that caused the hurt repeats. Plans are discussed, but only on their terms. This pattern creates a specific kind of mental strain. Your brain tries to hold two conflicting realities at once. One reality is built on their words, the other on your direct experience. When words and actions constantly misalign, you start doubting your own perception. You begin to monitor your tone, your timing, your requests, as if careful wording could force consistency from someone who is not operating with it. This is where emotional exhaustion takes root. You are not tired from loving too much. You are tired from trying to bridge a gap that was never meant to be closed. The psychology here is simple. For someone who uses emotional control, words are tools, not commitments. They are used to manage your reaction, restore calm, or regain influence. Actions, on the other hand, reveal true priorities. When you stop listening to what is said and start tracking what is consistently done, the confusion begins to lift. You stop asking why they will not change and start accepting that they already have. You already know what you know. The data is in the pattern, not in the explanation. You learn to separate performance from reality. You stop expecting words to become actions and start letting actions speak for themselves. And when you do that, the mental fog clears. You no longer need to decode hidden meanings because the surface behavior tells you everything you need to know. One of the clearest ways this dynamic reveals itself is when you introduce a simple boundary or ask for basic accountability. A healthy relationship responds to limits with respect, or at least a willingness to discuss them. A manipulative dynamic responds with defensiveness, deflection, or emotional pressure. You might notice that when you say no, the conversation suddenly shifts to your tone. When you ask a direct question, you get a counter-question about your intentions. When you point out a repeated behavior, you are suddenly the one who is too rigid, too sensitive, or too focused on the past. This is not a communication issue. It is a control mechanism. Boundaries reduce influence. Accountability removes the ability to rewrite the narrative. When someone's stability depends on managing your perception, rather than examining their own behavior, any limit you set will feel like a threat to them. The reaction is rarely about the boundary itself, it is about the loss of control. And in those moments, you probably found yourself backing down. You softened your stance. You re-explained yourself. You absorbed the discomfort so they would not have to. That is how the cycle sustains itself. It trains you to prioritize their emotional comfort over your own clarity. But clarity does not require their approval. A boundary is not a punishment. It is a statement of what you will no longer participate in. When you stop negotiating your worth, the dynamic loses its power. You do not need to convince them to respect you. You only need to stop participating in what disrespects you. The moment you refuse to absorb the blame for their reactions, you step out of the trap. You realize that their discomfort with your limits is not your responsibility to fix. It is their responsibility to manage. And you are allowed to step away while they do. Over time, these moments stop feeling like isolated incidents and start looking like a structure. The charm fades, but the need for attention remains. The apologies become routine, but the behavior stays the same. The intensity shifts between pulling you closer and pushing you away, keeping you in a state of waiting. This repetition is not an accident. It is the natural result of a relational style that prioritizes self-regulation over mutual connection. The cycle continues because it works for the person running it. It keeps you engaged, it keeps you analyzing, and it keeps you responsible for fixing what is not yours to fix. But repetition has a hidden benefit. It removes the need for guesswork. You no longer have to wonder what will happen next. You already know. You have seen the sequence before. You know how it starts, how it escalates, and how it resolves without real change. Recognizing this pattern is not about cynicism. It is about accuracy. When you stop treating each cycle as a new event and start seeing it as part of a larger blueprint, your nervous system begins to settle. You stop reacting to every shift. You start observing instead of absorbing. You step back emotionally, not out of coldness, but out of clarity. Distance does not erase what happened. It gives you the space to see it clearly. And in that space, the confusion loses its grip. You begin to trust your own judgment again. You realize that peace does not come from finally getting the right response. It comes from no longer waiting for one. You stop trying to earn consistency and start accepting that inconsistency is the actual baseline. That realization is not a defeat. It is a liberation. It means you are finally reading the situation correctly. This is where the shift happens. You stop trying to decode hidden meanings and start accepting surface behavior as enough information. You stop measuring their love by how much chaos you can survive. You stop tying your stability to their mood. Calm detachment is not indifference. It is the quiet decision to no longer invest your energy in a system that does not return it. It is choosing to step out of the cycle instead of trying to win it. When you detach, you are not abandoning yourself. You are protecting yourself. You begin to set limits that are not announced, but enforced through action. You stop over-explaining. You stop justifying your needs. You stop taking responsibility for emotions that were never yours to carry. This is not a sudden transformation. It is a gradual realignment. You will still feel moments of doubt. You will still remember the good parts. That is normal. Healing does not erase memory. It changes your relationship to it. You can acknowledge what felt real without letting it override what is true. You can honor the time you invested without staying in a situation that drains you. Self-respect grows in the quiet moments when you choose yourself, not dramatically, but consistently. You begin to notice how much lighter it feels to stop performing, how much clearer it gets when you stop translating their behavior for them, how much energy returns when you stop trying to earn what should have been offered freely. You learn that detachment is not about building walls. It is about stepping off a treadmill that was never going to take you anywhere. You stop running toward validation that will never arrive, and you start walking toward the peace that has been waiting for you all along. As you continue to step back, you will notice something important. The need to prove your point fades. The urgency to explain yourself disappears. You no longer need closure from them because you are already creating it for yourself. Closure is not a conversation. It is a decision. It is the moment you stop waiting for accountability and start building stability. You begin to rebuild your sense of reality on solid ground. You trust your memory. You trust your instincts. You trust that your needs are valid, without requiring validation from someone who cannot meet them. This is where emotional independence takes root. It is not about becoming hardened. It is about becoming grounded. You learn to recognize the difference between intensity and intimacy, between control and care, between words that soothe and actions that sustain. You start choosing environments where consistency is the baseline, not the exception. You allow yourself to be bored by drama. You allow yourself to walk away without looking back to see if they noticed. Your peace becomes more important than their approval. And that shift changes everything. You stop measuring your worth by how much someone is willing to change. You start measuring it by how well you protect your own well-being. You realize that leaving a confusing situation is not a failure. It is an act of self-preservation. You understand that walking away from emotional chaos is not abandonment. It is alignment. You are not running from love. You are making room for it. Real connection does not require you to shrink, to guess, or to carry the weight of someone else's instability. It asks for honesty. not performance. It offers steadiness, not cycles. It respects boundaries instead of testing them. Healing does not happen in a single moment. It happens in the quiet choices you make every day. Choosing to trust your perception. Choosing to stop arguing with reality. Choosing to place your energy where it is received, not where it is drained. You have already done the hardest part. You survived the confusion. You endured the self-doubt. You held on to your sense of truth even when it was constantly questioned. That strength is still in you. It does not disappear when you step away. It grows. You are not starting over from nothing. You are starting over with clarity. You know what imbalance feels like. You know what emotional exhaustion sounds like. You know what it means to give more than you receive. And now you know what to do with that information. You move forward with steadiness. You rebuild at your own pace. You allow yourself to rest. You stop rushing to fill the space left behind. You let time do what time does. It softens the sharp edges. It separates memory from current reality. It reminds you that peace is not something you earn. It is something you choose. You have already been through enough. You do not need to prove your resilience to anyone. You just need to keep choosing yourself, day by day, in small, quiet ways. The confusion will fade. The exhaustion will lift. The noise will settle. And in its place, you will find a calm that does not depend on anyone else's behavior. You will find your own rhythm again. You will trust yourself again. And you will realize that the person you were trying to understand all along was never the one who needed fixing. It was you. And you were never broken. You were just learning how to come back to yourself. Take your time. Breathe. Keep going. You are already free.